Greetings, family and friends of New Heritage Church. It's a delight and an honor and privilege to be with you today and to have a few moments to reflect on Randy Reinhardt's life. I've known Randy for 50 years, plus since he was a midshipman at the United States Naval Academy. And so we've had a long history as fellow pilgrims journeying together in our upward call in Christ. And there's benefit to long history and knowing people over many years, because you get to see the real picture. You see the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows, and we all have those. No one escapes the lows and the downside and the turns in the road that were not expected. And so observing Randy as a young man, as a midshipman, and then his response to the call of Christ upon his life, and that eventually leading him into a place of ministry to the church and to the local community. And so I've had the benefit of being able to observe that about Randy and his response to those twists and turns and uncertainties that come our way. And Randy was always recalibrating. And this is a lesson that we should learn from him, is that he was recalibrating to get things back on track. If he found himself being pulled or distracted or facing circumstances that were difficult and challenging, he would always turn his heart back to get centered on Jesus and to fulfilling God's call and purpose upon his life. So recalibrating, I'm sure as a pilot, as a P3 pilot, when he served in the Navy as an aviator, he was constantly having to pay attention to equipment that would keep him on course. And so he would have to recalibrate. He would have to pay attention to where he was going, where he was flying, and how to get to where he needed to go. And that's an example that we need to learn from Randy's life. He continuously recalibrated. And there were times when he was prone to take a journey in one direction or another, but he'd always come back to center and to recenter and to focus on the things that were primary. And there's guiding principles that I observed about Randy's life that are so valuable. And first of all, that was the love that he had for his wife, Linda, and the sweetness that exemplified, and how often when he would speak of her and their times together, their walks together, it was an atmosphere of a sweet fragrance surrounding their relationship. And he kept that as a guiding principle. And so family was very near and dear to his heart and was a guiding influence in his thinking. So his priorities were, first of all, his response to God and God's upward call upon his life and his love for God. That was always present. But then next was his family, his wife and his children. And third, but not least, was his love for the people at New Heritage Church. I've had the opportunity to walk with Randy from the early years as a young man when he was just part of a home group. And then over the years, as life developed and as church life developed in Colombia, I've had the opportunity and the privilege of being involved with him as he's gone through those different phases of the growth and development of church life. And of course, more recently, in the last several decades, has been the merger of two congregations into one church with the theme, One New Man, and New Heritage Church being the church family that represents that. And so watching him grow and go, as it were, was and is a privilege to look back and reflect upon Randy's life and the way he would come back, refocus, prioritize his family, his recalibrate his relationship and walk with the Lord, and then his unswerving commitment and love for the people at New Heritage Church. There's a backstory here that I would like to share just for a few moments. And many of you may know that I have served Randy as a pastor and as a leadership development coach for many years. And we would have conversations about the future. And I would probe this question now and then because I believe it's an important one. I would ask him, what does life look like beyond Columbia, Maryland? And that was not because I sensed dissatisfaction or in any way was he distracted or bored with his role and his responsibilities. If anything, it was just the opposite. It was his continuous sense of responsibility to the members of New Heritage Church, to his colleague, Fred Lessans, and the time that he would spend with him, this unswerving dedication, commitment, and love for the people at New Heritage Church. And for that reason, I thought to myself, Randy could get so locked in to his sense of responsibility to New Heritage Church that maybe there's other things that he might be missing or omitting. And so I would probe the question, what does life look like beyond Columbia, Maryland? And it was always challenging for him to address that because of this tug on his heart that he would experience and feel from the church family at New Heritage Church. But he could sense that God was doing things in his life that would involve a transition at some point in his role and his responsibilities at the church in Maryland. And some of that had to do with his own recognition that as an aging leader, that he needed to have a vision for emerging younger leaders and for New Heritage Church to have a future and to have the launch of a new life cycle with new and younger families, that he needed to give consideration to younger leadership that could be brought in and be part of the ongoing process and growth of the church. And at some point, he would face the challenge of passing the baton to others in leadership. So those are things that we talked about, prayed about. I'll be quick to say I never once told Randy what I thought he should do. I avoided taking any kind of command role or a role of suggesting what his next steps should look like. My commitment to him was to help him discover that for himself. And over a period of probably 18 months to 2 years, it was becoming clear in his own mind that the very best interest of those at New Heritage Church was for him to pass the baton and transition his leadership to emerging leadership and to his fellow colleague there, Fred Lessans. When Randy was diagnosed with his illness, of course, that became a very serious distraction for him and Linda. His time being hospitalized, dealing with the medical professionals and everything that was involved in a treatment of his condition necessarily distracted him from giving a lot of primary thought to this transition process. And toward the end of his days in his earthly pilgrimage, we would have conversations involving him taking the time to pen some thoughts that he could pass along to the members of New Heritage Church, expressing his confidence and support of Fred's senior leadership role in the days ahead, because he had a growing sense that under any circumstances, he would not be returning to the role that he had provided before that. And then in just days before Christmas, I had the opportunity for a conversation with him, and we talked about his need to write a brief statement that would convey not only his confidence, but the confidence of the elders in Fred's role stepping up and stepping in to things that Randy had previously provided for the church. And in that conversation, in a very tender moment, he said to me, he says, "Robert, I just do not have the strength to do that," and asked me to do that for him. And it was our plan to be able to present something to you prior to this occasion, but then we were faced with the very sudden turn of events that resulted in Randy stepping through the veil and stepping out of this journey, and thus not being present to be able to provide this for you himself. And nor did I have opportunity around the Christmas season to communicate something of this backstory to you. And so I'm taking that occasion today and want to assure you that in my conversations with Randy, there was consistently and ever-present confidence in Fred's leadership for you as New Heritage Church, as well as the support and the confidence of the elders, as Dave and Bob stand with Fred to see the next steps and the next chapter in the life of New Heritage Church. This major transition that Randy faced, I'd like to take a moment and talk about that. Oftentimes what happens when a person is facing a major transition is that you'll begin to feel unsettled, feeling like there's a disconnect, that something isn't where it needs to be. And it's just a sense that things were unsettled. It didn't involve discontentment. It didn't involve an absence of love for his role. But he could just sense that there was something about to change. And when we go through those times, it causes us to stop and drill down deep on what's really important, the values that are most significant for us, and the things that we must carry forward into the future. And I watched Randy do that, and the values that he lived out with New Heritage Church were very clear in his own mind. And as he moved forward into the future, he knew that he was addressing uncertainty. He didn't know what was next. He just sensed that there was something next and there was a change coming. He didn't know it was going to be stepping into his eternal reward. That is part of uncertainty, is that when we are facing uncertainty, we're uncertain. We're not able to say with clarity, this is where I'm going and this is what I will be doing. So what do we do when we're facing uncertainty? And I think about the Maritimers of old, who, when they would set out on journeys with uncharted waters, the thing that they would have to do is rely on a sextant to be able to read the stars and do a process in navigation called dead reckoning. And they would take their reading off of constellations and stars, and they would measure where they were by virtue of their relationship to these this heavenly reading, if you please. And when we're moving into uncertainty, as we all are at this season, none of us would have anticipated or expected the events that we've addressed in this last year to 2 years. On every front, things have not been as we thought they would be or as we would have predicted them to be. We've been faced with uncertainty on every hand. And so the question is, where do we look for our confidence? And I want to propose to you today that there is only one source that is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that is the person of Jesus Christ. He is the one who is certain yesterday, today, and forever. So if we're looking for circumstances or social conditions or political climates as a source of peace and confidence, we're really looking in the wrong direction. We have to do what Randy Reinhardt did, and that is constantly recalibrate. If we find ourselves being pulled aside or drifting from our primary focus of hearing God's voice, knowing his spirit, responding to his call upon our lives, regardless of where that might lead us vocationally, is that we are constantly needing to come back and recalibrate to that and acknowledge, Lord, you are the source of my peace. You're the source of my confidence. And you are the only thing that in reality is certain about the future. And if I have that compass bearing, and if I have that attitude and that focus, if you have that attitude and focus, then our confidence and our peace comes from a different source than the circumstances and surroundings that we are facing in our world today. Randy did that. So if I wanted to punctuate something about Randy's life and join my voice with those of you who are this day sharing thoughts and reflections and those things for which you're grateful about Randy's life, this would be one of the things that I would punctuate, is that Randy continuously recalibrated to the main thing, being the main thing, and finding his confidence and his trust and his peace in the person of our Lord Jesus Christ. And if he got distracted by circumstances or was confronted with a challenge, Randy would always want to bring it back and rest it in his relationship with the Lord and his walk with Christ. And so that's a point that I would like to leave with you today that speaks to me about Randy's life. And I trust that it speaks to you. And as we move forward in these days and with viruses and political uncertainties and changing events and circumstances in the world, this is a great time for us to follow Randy's example, recalibrate, and say, Lord, you alone are enough. You're the source of my peace. You're the source of my confidence. And even as that same attitude guided Randy home into the presence of the Lord, may that same principle and that same guidance carry us forward into the future and to the next life cycle of New Heritage Church. God bless you as you grieve. God bless you as you rejoice. And you give thanks for the life that was well lived before you in the person of Randy Reinhardt. Blessings.